You'd be surprised how quiet heartbreak sounds. No yelling. No accusations. Just the rustle of gift wrap, the soft clink of a teaspoon in a fancy mug, and your grown son, your only child, telling you that you're not expected this Christmas. Not invited. Not welcome. Not even a thought in the plans. It was 2 weeks before Christmas when it happened. I had driven across town with a tin of snickerdoodles wrapped in red ribbon, the way Maria used to. A little tradition I kept alive for the sake of family. Of pretending we were still close. Michael opened the door with his usual distracted smile, one that never quite reached his eyes anymore. "Hey, Mom." Inside, everything sparkled. Isabella had decorated like a catalogue, white and gold ornaments, perfectly symmetrical garlands, the kind of Christmas tree that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. Not a single homemade ornament in sight. Not one fingerprint of childhood. I sat down on their expensive leather couch, the one I co-signed for. I remember because it had taken my signature, my credit score, and my savings to convince the furniture company that a starter family deserved top-tier luxury. "I thought I could bring my turkey this year," I said, setting the cookie tin on the coffee table. "The one with the sage stuffing Maria used to love. Remember how she'd say it tasted better than her grandmother's?" Michael stiffened. His shoulders tensed like he'd been dreading this exact conversation. "Mom," he said, looking away. We've decided it'll just be Isabella's parents this year. For Christmas." I stared at him. "What do you mean, just Isabella's parents?" "They're flying in from Boston. And you know how they are about tradition. They like to have Christmas their way. It's just easier." There was a long pause. "It's easier," I repeated. "Easier to pretend I don't exist?" He winced. "It's not like that. We can do something the weekend after." The weekend after. As if Christmas were an oil change I could reschedule. I looked around the room, the $7,000 chandelier, the new hardwood floors, the imported stone fireplace, all things I had paid for or co-signed, either directly or indirectly. And now, I didn't even get a chair at the table. But I smiled. I always smile when I'm being dismissed. "Tell Isabella's parents," I said quietly, rising from the couch, "Feliz Navidad." He tried to say something else, but I was already halfway to the door. I passed the entryway where family photos hung, each new frame with Isabella's family front and center. In the few that still had me, I looked increasingly like a distant cousin photoshopped in for nostalgia. My hand gripped the doorknob. Cold. Steady. I walked out into the icy December air without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I drove away. Straight into silence. But not weakness. And if you've ever been erased from a table you helped build, or shut out of a room you painted yourself, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. Here on Revenge with Becky, we share real stories from women who've been betrayed and broken, but never beaten. Because sometimes revenge isn't rage. Sometimes it's precision. Now let me show you how I took everything back. The neighborhood shimmered with Christmas lights as I drove past, each house glowing with warmth I used to know. Couples stringing lights. Children skating in their driveways. Families laughing over bonfires. And me? I was just a mother in a truck full of memories. A woman who had loaned, given, and co-signed until her future was no longer hers. Until love became a credit balance. Until all I was to my only son was inconvenient. The numbers started crawling back into my brain. $2,800 a month. 5 years. $140,000 in mortgage payments. $23,000 in interest alone. $6,000 in emergency repairs. $1,100 for Isabella's baking phase. $2,000 on her second attempt at a jewelry business. I knew the numbers better than I knew their anniversary. The house they lived in bore my name on the mortgage. They needed me to qualify. At the time, I said yes because that's what mothers do, right? We don't think of the exit plan. We think of family. Until family no longer thinks of us. By the time I got home, my fingers were numb. Not from the cold. From the clenching. I pulled into the driveway of my small ranch-style home. 2-bedroom. Built in the 1970s. Still had the old popcorn ceilings. Maria and I used to laugh about scraping it down, but we never did. I stood in the doorway for a moment. Then I walked straight to my file cabinet. Pulled the folder. Mortgage, 813 Willow Creek Lane. Owners, Michael A. Flores and Elena M. Flores. My name. Still there. I had power. They'd forgotten that part. The next morning, I called the mortgage company. I need to speak with someone about a joint loan. I want to pause my portion of the payment. The agent was polite but confused. You want to freeze your half of the mortgage? Yes. Ma'am, that would affect the entire loan. I understand. There was a long pause. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. 3 days later, Michael called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, scared. Mom, I don't know what's going on with the mortgage company, but they're saying you've stopped payment. We're getting letters. Please call me. I didn't. Instead, I put on a pot of soup and watched Jeopardy! Reruns. He called again the next day. And the day after. Then Isabella texted. I don't know what you're trying to prove, Elena. But this is toxic and selfish. We have a child. We could lose our home. I stared at the message. They had a child. Funny, so did I. By New Year's, the official notice had arrived. They were 30 days from default. I knew Isabella would be furious. I knew Michael would panic. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had made their choice. Now I was making mine. They gave me silence for Christmas. I gave them reality for New Year's. And oh, the gifts kept coming. January blew in with bitterness sharper than the wind. The neighborhood pine trees were still dusted in tinsel, but the joy had long since blown away. All that remained was frost, and the sound of consequences catching up. Michael called again. This time, I picked up. Elena, Mom, what's going on? The bank says we're past due. That foreclosure notices are being processed. You didn't really. I did, I said calmly, stirring a pot of beans. I paused my payments. Why? His voice cracked like a dropped plate. Because you paused my importance. The silence on the other end wasn't confusion. It was realization. Elena, you can't do this, Isabella said later that night on speakerphone, her voice taut, like a violin string ready to snap. There's a child in this house. We could lose everything. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence stretch. Isabella, I said slowly. You told my son I wasn't welcome in the house I helped buy. Do you remember that? It wasn't personal, she snapped. It was architectural, I said. I didn't fit your aesthetic. Click. That ended the call. You see, a woman doesn't need to raise her voice to raise the stakes. The bank sent one final warning before proceedings would begin. Michael was on every line. Calls, emails, texts. Promises. Please. Guilt wrapped in apologies that didn't sound like him. Or maybe they did, and I just didn't know my son anymore. I remembered the day we closed on that house. He held my hand in the bank lobby like he was 10 again. We'll make you proud, Mom, he said. Isabella had kissed my cheek with that photo-ready smile, clutching her designer tote like she already owned everything inside. And now, the same woman was texting me. You're destroying your family. I deleted it without reading the rest. They had destroyed something long before I cancelled the mortgage. They destroyed me. On January 17th, I received a knock on the door. I was halfway through knitting a blanket for my neighbor's new baby. The kind of gift you make with time, not money. I opened it slowly. Michael stood on the porch. His coat looked too thin for the cold. Can I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. He sat down at the kitchen table, same spot he used to do his homework. His eyes wandered to the walls, the family photos, the crooked clock Maria refused to replace. Time didn't move in here. It lingered. I'm sorry, he said finally. I really am. I didn't speak. I didn't think. I thought it would just be easier. You know how Isabella's parents are. They're judgmental, and she didn't want tension. And you? I asked. He looked down. I didn't want to fight. You didn't fight for me. That shut him up. I'm your mother, I said softly. Not a hotel reservation you cancel for convenience. He nodded, swallowing hard. I've spent my whole life making things easier for you, Michael. I helped you buy that house. I paid your debt. I cooked when you were sick, showed up when you failed, clapped when you barely tried. And all I asked for was a seat at your table. Tears welled in his eyes. I know. I pointed to the clock. And now time's up. He broke. Not dramatically. No wailing. Just a quiet crumble. The kind men like him rarely show, unless their back is against a wall with foreclosure paperwork pinned to it. I don't know how to fix this, he whispered. You don't, I replied. You feel it. You carry it. Then you stop asking other people to carry you. He left without a deal. Without promises. And I let him. Because I had no intention of cleaning up his choices anymore. That weekend, Rosa came by. She brought arroz con leche and a look of concern. Have you heard? She asked gently. They listed the house. I blinked. Already. They're trying to sell before the foreclosure finalizes. I sipped my tea. Smart. Too bad the market's frozen like their empathy. Elena, she said cautiously, don't you think this is too far? They were too far, I replied. I'm just drawing the map they refused to read. She set down her spoon. You think he'll ever forgive you? I looked out the window, where my garden lay dormant beneath frost. I think forgiveness is a luxury people expect when they never offer it. 2 weeks later, the house sold. They barely broke even. Gone was the luxury living. Gone were the designer drapes and curated gallery walls. Isabella took her mixer, her handbags, and her pride. Michael moved into a 2-bedroom rental with linoleum floors and flickering lights. They called it downsizing. I called it alignment. In early spring, I got a letter. It wasn't from Michael. It was from their daughter, my granddaughter Sophia. Just 10 years old, but her words stung deeper than any lawsuit. Dear Grandma. Mommy says you're angry. Daddy says you're strong. I just miss you. I don't care about houses. I liked your cookies and your pink house slippers and when we watched old cartoons together. If I get married one day, I want you there. Love, Sophia *. I cried. For the first time since Christmas. And that's when I knew, my fight had never been about revenge. It was about visibility. I didn't want my name on a deed. I wanted it in a child's memory. In her comfort. In her love. The next day, I wrote Sophia back. Dear Sophia. I'm not angry at you. I love you more than sugar cookies and cartoons. I was just very hurt. When people are hurt, they sometimes build walls instead of bridges. I'll be waiting to cross that bridge whenever you're ready. Love, Grandma *. Isabella never replied. Michael called once more. Thank you, he said simply. For what? I didn't ask. But I knew. He finally felt the weight. And for once in my life, I didn't pick it up for him. You can tell a house is no longer a home when the curtains are the last things left standing. Michael's house went on the market in March. By April it sat hollow, stripped of the overpriced furniture, the curated Christmas cards still taped to the inside of kitchen cabinets, and the faint scent of vanilla sugar candles Isabella insisted made a house feel premium. Now it just smelled like dust. They left behind more than stuff. They left behind a truth they'd rather not face. When you build your comfort on someone else's sacrifice, one shift in footing brings everything down. The first time I saw Michael again after the sale, he wasn't wearing his usual crisp button-down or polished boots. He showed up at my door in a wrinkled sweatshirt, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked like the son I remembered, the one before the marble countertops and in-law expectations. He didn't say anything. Just handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. $6,000. First repayment, he said softly. From what I owe. I looked at it. Then at him. You know this doesn't fix it, I said. I know. But I need to start somewhere. He asked if he could come inside. I let him. We sat at the same kitchen table we'd sat at 100 times before, but this time, the silence between us wasn't angry. It was honest. I think I lost everything, he finally said, just to impress people who never truly respected me. He didn't say Isabella's name. But he didn't need to. She's moved in with her parents, he added. Temporarily, she says. But I don't think she's coming back. I sipped my coffee. She never really arrived. He flinched. You never liked her, did you? No, I said simply. But I loved you enough to stay quiet. For a while. He nodded slowly. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't want to be that man again. The one who watched his mother walk away and said nothing. There was a pause. You're not that man, I said. Not anymore. In May, Sophia started spending weekends with me. She was quiet at first. A child learning how to navigate adult wounds. But children are resilient. She soon began to relax, rebuilding our bond with board games, pancake mornings, and Sunday walks through the garden. She told me Isabella didn't let her talk about me at home. I didn't tell her that was petty. I just smiled and said, well, I think about you all the time. And that seemed to be enough. On Mother's Day, a card arrived. No signature. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. Isabella's. Inside it read, you made your point. Hope you're happy. I didn't keep it. Not because I was angry. But because it was empty. And I had no more room in my life for empty gestures. By summer, Michael had moved into a modest duplex on the east side of town. No gate. No crown molding. Just a small backyard and second-hand appliances that hummed in strange rhythms. He invited me to dinner in early June. I almost declined. But I went. Because sometimes healing doesn't walk through the front door, it comes through the side gate with a casserole and low expectations. The house was clean but lived in. He cooked spaghetti. It was bland. But it was made with effort, and that mattered more than the flavor. At the table, Sophia told me about her school play. Michael beamed at her. There was a kind of warmth in the room that had never existed in the old house, no matter how many lights sparkled. This is better, he said suddenly. All of this. It's quieter, but it feels like mine. It is, I said. For better or worse. I never asked what happened between him and Isabella. It wasn't mine to fix. But the truth came one afternoon while Michael helped me carry groceries. She called the mortgage company, he said. Tried to report fraud. Said you were manipulating the account to retaliate emotionally. I raised an eyebrow. What happened? She hung up after they reminded her the property was under your legal name and you were fully within your rights. I smiled. Good to know someone still reads the fine print. She also asked about the child support payments, whether she could pursue back pay. For what? For the lifestyle she lost. I laughed, genuinely. Let her try. Michael looked at me with something like amusement. You're not scared of her, are you? I used to be, I admitted. Because I was scared of losing you. He paused. You didn't. Didn't I? I asked. He didn't answer. That summer, I rewrote my will. Michael wasn't removed. But I made one thing clear, every penny he received was conditional. He would never again be handed wealth he didn't respect. And Sophia, if she ever needed help for school, a home, or to start her life, she'd have it. Because some cycles need to be broken gently. And others? With terms. One night in August, while watching the sunset from the porch, Michael asked me something unexpected. Do you regret canceling the mortgage? I thought about it. No, I said. Not for a second. Even knowing what it cost us? It didn't cost us, Mijo, I said gently. It revealed us. He nodded slowly. Sometimes the truth isn't a thunderclap. Sometimes it's a whisper you've ignored until it becomes impossible to unhear. Sophia came to stay for the entire fall break. We baked cookies, watched movies, and danced to old music in the kitchen. On her last night, she curled up beside me on the couch and asked, Grandma, are you happy now? I looked down at her, brushed her hair back from her forehead, and said, yes. I'm finally home again. Because home wasn't a house. It was the right to matter. And no one was ever going to take that from me again. Some people vanish from your life with silence. Others go out swinging. Isabella was the latter. She didn't just fade. She flared, one last attempt to rewrite the story, to paint herself the victim, to make my decision look like cruelty instead of consequence. It started with a letter. A thick, glossy envelope with faux gold trim arrived in early September. Not addressed to me, but to my lawyer. Inside was a notice of intent. Isabella was filing a claim for financial manipulation, willful emotional harm, and unlawful interference in the livelihood of a dependent household. In short, she was suing me. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so vicious. I stared at the papers in disbelief, my tea going cold in my hands. She'd never worked more than part-time, never made a mortgage payment, never attended a meeting or signed a single loan. And now she claimed I was the reason her life had unraveled. Michael came over the next evening with Sophia. He looked anxious before I even showed him the envelope. When I handed it to him, he barely flinched. "I was afraid of this," he said. "You knew she'd do this?" "She warned me. Said if I didn't help her with legal fees, she'd go nuclear." He rubbed his forehead. "I didn't think she meant it." "She always meant it," I said. "The moment I said no." He sighed. "She's trying to claim damages for stress and loss of stability." I nodded slowly. "That's rich, considering she handed me a Christmas without my family." He was quiet. Then he looked up at me, a question in his eyes I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "What should I do?" I didn't answer right away. Because part of me wanted to say, "This isn't your fight anymore. You made your choices. You lived in silence when she pushed me out." But the other part, the mother in me, still wanted him to rise. To protect something for once. So I said, "Tell the truth." We hired Mallory, a firecracker of an attorney barely older than Sophia. She read through the documents with a furrowed brow and a calm confidence I admired instantly. "She has no case," Mallory said, flipping pages. "All payments were voluntary. Nothing was court-mandated. And the property title was in your name. This is noise." "She's good at noise," I muttered. Mallory gave me a small smile. "Well, I'm good at silence. The kind that comes after a case is dismissed." 2 weeks later, Isabella filed the claim officially. Michael was served at work. She had written his name on the paperwork too, accusing him of abandoning their shared financial goals and colluding with his mother. He called me in a panic. "I didn't know she'd drag me in. I swear." "You helped her for years," I said. "Even when you knew what she was." "I didn't see it then." "You didn't want to." He was silent. "She's trying to scare you," I said. "Don't let her." The preliminary hearing was set for mid-October. It was quiet in the days leading up to it. Almost too quiet. Sophia sensed it. Children always do. She asked me one night during dinner, "Is Mommy mad at you?" I looked at her, then at Michael, who looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "She's confused," I said gently. "Sometimes when people lose things, they blame whoever's closest." Sophia played with her peas. "You didn't do anything wrong." I kissed the top of her head. "Even good people get blamed, sweetheart. That's why we always tell the truth, so we don't have to be afraid of it later." The hearing lasted just under 20 minutes. Isabella showed up alone, wearing a dramatic black blouse, like it was a courtroom drama and she was the grieving widow of her former lifestyle. Mallory dismantled the filing with 3 sentences. "There is no legal claim here," she said. "No documentation. No proof of dependency. No fraud. Just emotional language disguised as litigation." The judge barely blinked before dismissing the case. Isabella didn't look at me when she walked out. She looked at Michael, and for the first time, he didn't flinch. He looked relieved. Afterward, he and I sat outside on the courthouse steps. The autumn breeze tugged at my scarf. We didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I almost gave her everything. Even after everything." "I know," I said. "She made me believe that protecting her was the same as loving her." I looked out at the street. "That's because she knew you didn't know the difference yet." He nodded, quietly absorbing that. "I don't know if I'll ever be a good man," he added. "You already are," I said. "But it'll take time to believe it." Sophia and I baked cookies that weekend. She danced in the kitchen, the way Maria used to, twirling with a wooden spoon in her hand. She asked if we could carve pumpkins next week. I said yes before she finished the sentence. She didn't talk about Isabella. And I didn't bring her up. One night, long after Sophia had gone to bed, Michael lingered by the door. I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you, he said. You already did. He looked confused. You showed up, I said. And you stayed. Sometimes, that's all mothers want in the end. I still think about that Christmas. The one where it all broke. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted. If I should have just taken the rejection quietly. Let them have their neat little holiday with their curated family image. But then I remember what it felt like to walk out of that house. Not devastated. Not humiliated. Just free. Because sometimes love becomes a leash. And sometimes you have to cut it. Not out of hate. But because you finally remembered how to stand. By November, the mornings had changed. There was a chill to everything. Cold tile under my feet, crisp wind that found its way through the window cracks, and a kind of stillness in my bones that only came with clarity. I didn't ache with resentment anymore. I didn't flinch when Michael's name popped up on my phone. And when I passed the corner of 6th and Laramie, the street where his old house stood, I no longer looked away. I looked right at it. Quiet. Sold. Emptied of ornaments, marble countertops, and carefully staged dinners. They had moved on. And so had I. That week, I hosted Sophia's school bake sale at my house. The school cafeteria had water damage, and the PTA was scrambling. I offered before they even finished asking. Michael dropped Sophia off with 2 tins of brownies and a grateful smile. Your house smells like home, he said, stepping inside. Because it is, I replied. He didn't argue. Sophia ran in, already asking if we could use the red sprinkles and the shaped cookie cutters. I showed her where they were, same drawer, same spot they'd always been in, even through everything. That day, my house filled with laughter again. Children ran through the hallway. Parents gathered in the kitchen. Someone played music from a phone. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm. And it was mine. Later that night, after the cleanup and the leftovers were packed away, Michael lingered again. He stood in the living room, hands in his jacket pockets, rocking on his heels like he was working up the nerve to say something. I saw Isabella, he finally said. I looked up from folding the dish towels. She's staying with a friend. Says she might take Sophia for Christmas this year. Just for the weekend. I paused. Has Sophia said she wants that? She's nervous, he admitted. She remembers what happened last Christmas. The tension. The door. I remembered too. Do I have a say? I asked. He didn't answer right away. I want you with us this year, he said. No matter what Isabella says. No matter who frowns at it. You deserve to be there. I studied his face. The boy was gone. The man had finally arrived. I said nothing in reply. Just nodded, softly. Thanksgiving came first. Michael hosted. In the duplex, with borrowed chairs and mismatched plates. Sophia made little name tags out of construction paper. She wrote Grandma Elena in glitter glue and placed it at the head of the table. I hadn't sat at the head of anything in years. The food wasn't perfect. The turkey was slightly dry. The mashed potatoes were store-bought. But when Sophia stood and gave a tiny toast, I'm thankful for people who stay, no one cared about the seasoning. We all just felt it. That something real had returned. December came quick after that. One morning, I opened the mailbox to find a small white envelope. Isabella's handwriting again. But this time, no lawsuit. No dramatics. Just a folded note that read, Don't turn Sophia against me. Whatever you think of me, I was trying to protect what was mine. I folded the paper neatly and slid it back into the envelope. Then I tossed it into the fire. Because Sophia was never hers to possess. She was all of ours to protect. Michael kept his promise. On Christmas Eve, I sat beside Sophia in a small living room with second-hand stockings and too much tinsel. There was no chandelier. No 12-foot tree. Just a modest pine that Michael and Sophia had decorated together, full of lopsided ornaments and hand-cut snowflakes. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. They handed me a gift. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small wooden box, hand-carved with a rose motif. Sophia beamed. I made it in art class, she said. To keep your rings in. I smiled, eyes brimming. I hadn't worn my wedding ring in years. Not since Maria passed. But I knew exactly where it was. That night, after Sophia fell asleep on the couch wrapped in fleece blankets, Michael and I sat by the window, watching snow fall. She's happy, I said. I know, he replied. He paused, then added, thank you. For letting me fall. For not cushioning everything. You're welcome, I said. Do you think she'll forget what happened last year? No, I said. But she'll remember what happened this year more. That's the thing no one tells you about justice. It doesn't always look like a courtroom win or a massive takedown. Sometimes it's a holiday reclaimed. A dinner table repopulate. A granddaughter curled against your arm. Sometimes revenge is letting them see what you look like, whole, joyful, unbothered, without needing them to understand how hard it was to get there. Because you did. And you're still here. The last thing Michael said to me that night was something simple. Next year, he said, I want to host Christmas again. But only if you'll be there. I smiled. Then it'll finally feel like Christmas. It's funny what peace sounds like. For me, it was the clatter of dishes drying on a towel, the faint hum of Sophia singing in the background, and the creak of my old rocking chair as I sat by the window with a cup of tea. No raised voices. No guilt-laced phone calls. No more checking my bank account wondering what else I'd be asked to give up. Just me, at 70 years old, sitting in a house I still owned, surrounded by everything I'd earned, and no longer afraid to lose anyone who didn't value me. That was peace. It didn't come easy. But it came. The new year arrived with rain, not snow. Michael brought Sophia by on New Year's Day, cheeks flushed from the wind, holding a plastic tub of tamales he'd attempted himself. I didn't ask who helped. The masa was too soft, the filling uneven, but the effort made it the best I'd had in years. We ate together while watching old movies. Sophia curled up in my Afghan and fell asleep by 9. Do you ever think about what might have happened if I hadn't said it? Michael asked suddenly. If you hadn't said what? That you weren't welcome. That horrible thing I told you last Christmas. I took a sip of tea before answering. I think about it less and less. He studied my face. How did you forgive me? I didn't, I said calmly. His eyebrows lifted. I didn't forgive the you that said it. I waited for the you who regretted it to show up. And you did. He looked down at his plate. Did you ever hate me? No, I said. But I hated who I had to become just to stay close to you. The room sat quiet for a beat too long. But you're back now, I said. And I didn't have to beg or shrink to make it happen. He nodded. Then we're okay, I finished. He smiled. We are. The next week, I received a final envelope in the mail. Postmarked from Boston. Inside, a check. $1,000. In the memo line, 2 words, for Sophia. No note. No return address. Isabella's handwriting again. She had finally found a way to contribute. I deposited it into a college savings account. It was the only piece of her I would accept. Spring bloomed slow but steady. Sophia and I planted tulips, just like her mother used to hate. Too simple, Isabella once said. Sophia disagreed. They're happy flowers, she told me. Like they're surprised to be alive again. I understood that feeling. Better than most. One afternoon, while repotting the gardenia bush, I found something strange. An old, rusted key. It had been buried beneath the soil for years, long forgotten. I turned it over in my hand, unsure what it once opened. Maybe a shed, a storage box, or one of the dozens of doors in this house that had long since been replaced. But I kept it. Not because I needed it to open anything, but because it reminded me that some things need to be buried before they can be found again. In June, Sophia graduated from elementary school. Michael saved me a seat in the front row. He held a paper fan he made out of the program when the air conditioning cut out, dabbing his forehead dramatically. You'd think they could spring for a working thermostat, he whispered. I paid for that thermostat, I replied with a smirk. We laughed. Quietly. Together. When Sophia's name was called, she walked across the stage with her chin high, her hair braided with ribbon, and a locket around her neck. It was mine. Inside was a picture of Maria and me, our wedding photo from 1974. Sophia had asked for it a few months earlier. I didn't say no. She wore our history with pride. Later that night, Michael and I sat on my porch again. Do you think I'll ever stop feeling ashamed? He asked. No, I said. And that's good. He blinked. Because that shame reminds you never to make someone you love feel small again. He nodded. I think about it every day. Then you're growing. He looked out toward the street. She hasn't asked for Sophia. She will, I said. What do I do then? You do what you didn't do last time. He looked at me. You say no. July passed. August 2. Then one day, an email. From Isabella. No subject line. Just 2 sentences. I'm getting remarried. I'll be moving to San Diego. I closed the message without replying. Sophia never mentioned it. So neither did I. Now, as I sit here writing this, 1 year later, I can say this with certainty. I don't regret a thing. Not freezing the mortgage. Not ignoring the calls. Not walking out of a house I helped pay for. And definitely not standing up for the version of myself I had nearly forgotten. Because I am not a wallet. I am not an afterthought. And I am not someone you uninvite from your life without consequences. This story wasn't about revenge for me. It was about restoration. Reclaiming the seat I had always earned. And if you're listening, if you've ever been excluded, dismissed, or reduced to your utility, let me tell you this. You are not wrong for saying enough. You are not cruel for choosing dignity. And you are absolutely allowed to cancel the payments on someone else's arrogance. You built the table. You deserve a place at it.